So hey everyone, I'm Jeff Easingwood here from Clearly Coastal Charters up in Prince Rupert, and today I'm meeting with Lance from the Sport Fishing Institute of BC. Lance is part of a study on salmon survivability and have some interesting things he wants to share with you today. So, Lance, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. And hello to everyone watching out there. Today we're going to talk about something called best practices. What it is a group of recommendations that have come out of the study you just mentioned to start that are things that we as anglers can maybe adapt or change or follow when we're out on the water to help improve the chances that any fish that we release is going to survive, or at least improve the chance of them surviving. All of these practices and recommendations came out of several studies that were done by the University of British Columbia, the Pacific Salmon Ecology Lab, or Ecology and Conservation Lab. Got to get it right, or
Yeah.
they'll not be happy with me. But a whole variety of projects, and they recently released a summary of all of those findings, which is a best practices list. And we'll tell you how to have a look at that. What we're going to talk about today is some highlights from it. So a lot of it kind of all comes together with an idea that can be summed up by saying, handle fish as little as possible.
Right.
Now, lots of things that play into that, but that's kind of the thought we want to keep in mind when you're out on the water. So what that really means, there's a lot of reasons why, as an angler, you may choose to release a fish when you're out in the water. It could be, the fish is too small or sublegal, so it's not legal to keep.
Hmm.
Or in some cases, maybe too big. In some areas of the coast, there's slot sizes in place or, at various times of the year. Or if you're participating in, let's say, a marked selective fishery, which is a fishery that's designed to keep hatchery marked fish and release any unmarked or potentially wild fish. So, whatever the reason might be that you're going to choose to release a fish, as anglers, we have a responsibility to do whatever we can to make sure those fish are going to survive. So, handling as little as possible is the best way to do that. And so, what does that really mean? Well, it starts out with one of the first things you can do. If a fish comes up and you've made the decision or choice as an angler that you're going to release that fish, uh, do so at the water line. So, in other words, don't bring the fish out of the water, don't bring it in the boat or any of those things. If you're going to release it, the simplest way is just to release it at the water line.
Yep.
There's a lot of ways you can do that. One of them is called a gaff release, which everybody knows what a gaff is, but it basically slide it down the line to the hook. And in most cases, you can kind of rock or flip that hook free.
Yeah.
Don't have to use a gaff. You can use a gaff. You can use another tool if you're more comfortable with pliers, whatever it might be. But the idea is to just pop that hook free right while the fish is still in the water. Don't bring them out and let them swim away.
Yeah.
By doing so, you're going to minimize a whole lot of things, but you're essentially just reducing the potential for any damage to occur. So
Right.
that's the first thing,
Okay.
and there's a variety of other things that also come into it, but that's kind of the first big one. If you're unfamiliar with what we're talking about with the gaff release, there is a website called Release Them Right. And it has all this information that I'm going to talk about, and it has some helpful little clips that you can go to demonstrate some of this. So if you're unfamiliar, I encourage you to have a look at that. That website also has a link to the study I mentioned with you can look at all of the data and you can look at these best practice recommendations. So website that's got a lot of good info. Also, if you're a user of the Fishing BC app, there's a tab right on that app
Oh,
where
very
you can
cool.
look at this best practice information as well. Simple and easy.
Yeah.
You can click right on it. So a couple little tips there. But yeah, so that's kind of the first part of handling as little as possible. So second is kind of some changes or adapting our gear that allows that to be possible. So one of the first things to do is we're talking about going to a single hook and a size of 3/0 for the maximum size. And more importantly than the size is what we call the hook gap measurement, which is the distance from the tip of the hook to the shank of the hook. That's
Okay.
called the hook gap. And what you'll find if you were to take a measuring device of some kind into any tackle store and you start measuring, you can find, 4 or 5 packages of hooks that all say they're size 3/0 with very, very different hook gap measurements. And so
Okay.
what we're looking for is something at 15 millimeters or as close as you can get, depending on where you are and what's available in your shop. But we're trying to get to that 15 millimeter mark. And then the other measurement that also is important comes to the shank or the length of the shank. And so we're encouraging to use a short style shank. So an octopus style hook for kind of a reference point that a lot of people might know versus a big commercial J hook that has a really long shank.
Okay.
And so how those two things come together, the hook gap and the shank, determines when a fish takes that lure, whatever lure you're using, bait, whatever it might be in their mouth, how far in can that hook go?
Yeah.
And then when it rotates into the fish, what's it going to hit? And what we found is that the longer the shank and the bigger that hook gap, it allows that hook to reach either the eyes or the blood vessels in the roof of the mouth that feed the eyes.
Okay.
And what the study showed was that that is one of the most critical pieces of damage that happens that affects whether that fish is going to survive or not. So we're trying to minimize the chances that that hook can get to the eye or get to those blood vessels by going with a shorter shank, a shorter gap, and a single hook, as opposed to a double hook rig or a treble hook.
Yeah.
And so lots of people, if they're using bait, have a double hook rig. If you buy a hoochie off the shelf, chances are it's rigged with a double hook. So you do have to adapt your gear a little bit, and there's some simple, easy tricks to do that. But we're trying to get down to that single hook, and so that's kind of a piece of adapting your gear. And then the other part comes in is using a net.
Right.
And this is one that really surprised me, and in that nets damaged the fins of the fish universally. So we tested a whole bunch of different styles of nets, even stitching different manufacturers and things together, different materials, rubber coated, non-rubber coated, small mesh, big mesh, large diameter rubber, small diameter. We had all this stuff stitched together and tested it all, and they all damage fins. And more importantly than the damage is that fins don't heal.
Yeah.
So during the tagging studies that UBC did, they were able to tag fish out in salt and then recover those fish on the spawning bed and look at what was going on. And in the case of fins, that damage was still there, just like it was in the salt. And in most cases, it was worse.
Wow.
And so they just don't heal. So as soon as you damage those fins, the fish is never going to get it back. And probably the easiest thing to think about, what's that mean to the fish? Think about swimming in a swimming pool. Hold your hand up with my fingers closed, how you normally might swim. Then think about what that might be like if you opened them up and tried to swim. Are you actually going to get anywhere in a hurry? Probably
Yeah.
not. Pretty big difference. That same thing for a fish. So that one really surprised me. I have to say
Yeah.
that was one of the shockers for me personally. Is I really thought we were going to find something that worked. So
That is
that's
surprising as well. Yeah.
yeah, and one of the other things that I mentioned before when it came to the hooks and those eye injuries, and that was another thing that really surprised me. And what we found was that, quite often as an angler, you'll have a fish, it comes up, even if you chose to bring it in the boat for whatever reason.
Hmm.
Fish seems really healthy, damage was minimal. We might take a photo and we release that fish, and we feel good about it because it swam away, looked like it was in great shape.
Yeah.
Well, during the study, what we did is we were able to hold fish for up to 14 days after that capture event. And what we found was that there were a lot of things that were delayed effects, or they showed up in a lot of cases after about day 5.
Okay.
That a fish that looked great on day 1 when we caught it on the charter boat maybe showed a little bit of signs of issue when it got on the science boat 10 minutes later. But by day 5, a lot of these things had really magnified, and any damage to the eye or in those blood vessels and things, in most cases, that fish didn't make it past day 10.
Wow.
because as things really ramped up. So there's a lot of studies that have been done in the past, some of them quite a few years ago, but a lot of what they all had in common is most of them stopped at the 3 day mark if they went that far.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these delayed effects never really had a chance to show up. So that eye damage and blood loss was one. Even again, one of the things that I was able to personally watch is a fish that I landed on the charter boat I happened to be on. Was one doing the sampling on it. It looked great. Hook was maybe a little deeper than I would like, but it
Okay.
wasn't bad. Didn't seem to be bleeding. Eye looked good. All these things. By the time it got to the science boat, about 10 minutes later, there were that fish, the one I'm thinking of, already had blood in his eye. The
Wow.
eye had already started to show signs that it wasn't tracking, it wasn't performing very well.
Yeah.
And that particular fish didn't live past day 6.
That's wow.
Um, so, it got a chance to be on the water and actually see these things directly, and situations where we thought a fish was great and this delayed effect took place. Now, not every fish,
Yeah.
a lot of fish surprised us. I will also say there were fish that were bleeding pretty good, but that the blood was coming, from somewhere in the exterior or somewhere out away from the gills and not in the eyes or the blood, roof of the mouth, where that fish ended up recovering and being just fine by day 14.
Incredible.
So that's where that hook size and style again starts to come into. Where's
Yeah.
that damage going to occur? It's not just the fact that it was bleeding or had hook damage, but where was it? That
I
really started to show up as key.
yeah, and I
And
find it really
so, yeah, and so
sorry.
that's something that ended up being important. So, yeah, so it's kind of a quick high level kind of thing, but maybe we should pause for a second, see do you have
Yeah.
anything that jumps out at you, and we can talk about some more things, but just kind of some initial thoughts there.
Yeah, no, I just find it incredible that with the damage regarding the hook size and the location where, we've all been there. Catch a fish,
Yep,
we don't want to keep it. It looks healthy, so we release it, not knowing that, 3, 5 days later, this fish isn't going to make it, right? And we thought we did the right thing and
yep,
released it. And like you said, it's not every fish, but still, that hook size plays such a huge role, and a role that we visibly can't see when we have that fish up to the boat, whether we water release it or net it,
yep.
that kind of thing. So, one thing you had mentioned previously to me off the camera, was about hand imprints when we're holding fish for
Yeah,
photos. Tell me a little bit
that,
about that.
yeah, absolutely. That's another one that really shocked me again. Lifelong angler, been on the water, handled countless numbers of fish, and always made every effort I could to try to handle them the best I could, and
Hmm.
thought I was doing it really well. Again, a particular fish I can speak to that followed that same process, landed it on the charter boat I was on, handled, sampled the fish. It was a fish that was very calm. It was very calm in the net, very calm in the trough, didn't really thrash around, didn't do a lot of stuff that we might normally associate with damage.
Yeah.
Didn't have to grip his tail very tight, minimal handling to maneuver him around and get him from A to B and all those kinds of things. So again, a fish that looked really good, and even to the point when it got in the holding tank, and we were looking at him from day to day, was still looking pretty good. All of a sudden, here comes this fish on day 5, and you can see that handprint right on the tail where I handled it.
Really?
And so that was our first, another shocker for me of saying, I would have thought that fish was going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
And that same fish, that handprint really showed up on day 5. By day 9, had some really bad infections that had grabbed the hold right in that place where I was handling the tail.
Yeah.
And by day 10, he had to be euthanized, didn't make it. So again, not every fish,
Yeah.
but it's an example of one of those things that we all thought we could do really, really well and wasn't doing anything. And in some cases, it does.
Yeah.
So again, it feeds towards this idea of handling as little as possible and the choices that we make as an angler when that fish first comes up. And there's some decisions we can do then, and it kind of plays into the idea. If it's not legal and you're not going to keep it,
Hmm.
then deal with it in the water and don't bring that fish in the boat. One of the thoughts that comes to mind, we've all done it, talked about this idea of handling the tail grab photos.
Yeah.
All of us as anglers and sportsmen and being out in the outdoors, hunting, fishing, whatever it might be, we've all got those trips and we're making memories and we all have countless thousands of photos from all the experiences. And it's something we do every day.
Yeah.
Um, Even though we've got thousands, I go out on the water this weekend. I'm going to take another one.
Yeah. Same
It's
here.
just it's
Yep.
what we do
Yep.
as guides. And if you're doing it for a profession, of course, the people that come with you, your customers, are wanting to take those memories home. So how does that jive with all of this new information we have and this idea of not bringing them in the boat? Well, it's just a simple little shift from, in most cases, you're probably going to harvest a fish at some point in that day. And it's kind of shifting the idea of taking the photos and the pictures and holding up the biggest fish that we come across, even though we might choose to release it, to,
Yep.
hey, here's this fish I retained. It's a beautiful looking fish. And it's shifting that expectation of what makes the memories, what makes the keepsakes over time. None of this is going to happen right away. But we're just asking people to start thinking about that,
Yeah.
making some of those transitions away from these things that have shown in the study that, hey, these actually cause damage we didn't really think about.
Yeah.
So
We think
subtle
of it.
change, but it can make a big difference in terms of across the whole fishery. What
Right.
kind of impact are we having on all these fish that are being released?
Yeah, exactly. I was curious, did you guys look into if wearing gloves or bare hands make a difference?
We sure did. And we tested the obvious gloves, no gloves, but we
Yeah.
tested a bunch of different kind of gloves. To be honest, didn't make a hill's bean worth of difference.
No, hey.
The closest was bare hand to an actual lab nitro type of glove, but you
Yeah.
could still see it. It didn't get rid of it. Was the nitro glove better than fish handling gloves you see, cloth, wool, all those things? Yeah, it was, but
Okay.
still, gloves as a rule didn't really help.
Right.
Some of them did a lot of damage, like those wool or some of those that are
Yeah.
marketed as release or handling gloves were horrible.
Yeah.
A lot of scale loss, a lot of everything
Right.
in those delayed effects. So something to think about.
Yeah. So anytime.
But yeah, just get your hand wet. That's the best thing you can
Okay.
do.
Yeah. So basically, though, I mean, anytime we're handling the fish, we're increasing the chance of infection or
Yep,
bacteria getting in on the fish and increasing
exactly.
possible mortality on the fish that we touch.
Exactly. And so if you can get away, if you can minimize that handling, if you can shift what you're doing, anything you do is going to have a positive effect on whether that fish survives or not. And a kind of a quick note there too is something we've probably all done as well, which is reviving a fish boat side.
Yeah.
There's been previous talks about torpedoing a fish if you brought it in the boat, not holding it in the water and things, but it's even a step further because again, even if you do a waterline release, you're doing everything you think you're supposed to do. The fish is a little extra tired, and you think in your head, I should hang on to it, revive it, then let it swim away. Well, then you've just done that tail handling the same way we talked about that can have a delayed effect. Sometimes there may be no way around it. We've all been in situations where you bring a fish up, all of a sudden you've got a sea lion stalking, and you let go of that fish, it's gone.
Yeah.
So again, there's all kinds of situations you could come up with that might say, hey, this may not work there. That could be the case, but we're just saying, think about these things every day you're on the water and try to follow them as best you can. Will have a positive effect on what goes on in the fishery. And so, yeah, it's that handle them as little as possible.
Yeah.
And if we're all doing that, it can have a really good positive effect.
Absolutely. Because I mean, there's fisheries throughout our province, the West Coast, that are not doing so well, that are struggling. So, I mean, I think as
Exactly.
sports fishermen and as a charter guide, we want to ensure that these fish are around for future generations. And so, if we can start shifting the thinking and increasing how many of our fish we can impact, we want this to last and not get shut down on us.
Exactly. I mean, it's those of us who do it either for a living or it's just a passion, and we do it all the time. You want to be able to share that with the next generation coming, and you want them to be able to share it with the next generation after that.
Yeah.
It's part of our DNA, part of our culture, being on the West Coast, being outdoorsmen, however you want to describe it. We owe it to the next generations for them to be able to do the same thing and be able to develop those same passions and just enjoy time on the water, whether it's
Yeah.
actually angling or whether you're just out boating or whether you put a line in the water, whether you catch anything or not. That experience is what we're all kind of craving. And and we want everyone to have a chance to enjoy that. And we're at a place where we can make some real basic changes in how we go about the fishery and have a real positive effect on what's going on with these fish for the next generations. And it doesn't matter where you angle, whether it's up north, Prince Rupert, where you are, down here in Nanaimo, where I am,
Hmm.
anywhere on the coast, these fish are highly migratory. And
Hmm.
so there are particular stocks of salmon that are doing well, but then there are others that aren't, and they're called stocks of concern. If you're an angler that's out a lot, you probably heard that term from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And there are some particular types that aren't doing well. And even though the river that they may call home is part of the Fraser system somewhere, those fish still migrate through Prince Rupert. They spend time in Alaska.
Yeah.
I spent some time guiding up there on the water, and fish that got sent in with tagged heads were tracing back to rivers in BC. These
Mm.
fish are highly migratory, and so you have to kind of get away from that thinking too, that when I'm fishing my local waters, that I'm fishing on local fish. It's not always the case. And
Oh.
so everybody has a chance to really impact positive change and help some of these stocks of concern recover by following some of these best practices. And so it doesn't matter where you are, it's something you can contribute. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So and I think on that, we kind of mentioned it, but it's not, this isn't a BC only or a Vancouver Island only, excuse me, thing. This is Alaska, BC, Washington, Oregon. This is our whole salmon fishery.
All of it, and it's something that, the SFI, so myself, one of the activities I'm also engaged in is not just the study work, but is the communication piece. How do we get the stuff
Mhm.
out? You and I are talking today. That's one way. We're attending sports shows and talking to as many people as we can, but we're also going to international conferences. I'm going to be at the American Fisheries Society conference in March in Vancouver
Okay.
because we're trying to get this information out and across not just BC, but all over the West Coast where all of these fish are migrating and all of them are affected. And BC isn't the only one affected. There's rivers in California, Oregon, and
Yeah.
Washington that are also struggling, areas in Alaska that are struggling. So, these things have a real far reaching impact if we're able to successfully get it widespread throughout the angling community and affect change. And so it's something that can have a real positive effect if we're successful at doing that.
Well, and I think, yeah, exactly. And it's important for us all to work together to try and get this. And I mean, the information you guys are providing for DFO is invaluable as well. Because I mean, I've worked in government before, and I know funding can be an issue at times. And so the more information that we can share with DFO as well is only going to help us, whether it's changing these practices or whatever else it might be, to try and improve these fisheries.
Exactly, and that is one point about the study that I'll point out. And again, I encourage people, if you want to know a lot of the facts, you can dig into it.
Hmm.
But a lot of these study work is being funded through the BC Salmon and Restoration and Innovation Fund, which is a government funding pool, but it's done by independent scientists. So the scientists from UBC are the ones that are actually designing the protocols. They're handling all of the data and all of those things, so that no matter whether you're an angler or you're someone from DFO or you're someone from a conservation organization, you can trust the data that's coming out of it because it's being done independently. It's not being manipulated by
Yeah.
an angler or an organization that represents anglers. It's independent science, and so that's an important piece of what we're doing. And the SFI is there to support and, of course, be involved in that, both on the water and in planning and all those things. But this is independent science that's being done, and that's a critical piece because the data that comes out of it needs to be able to be trusted by anyone.
Yeah,
And in
exactly.
this day and age of information, there's so much available to people. If you get online and do a little searching, you can probably find a study or an article or something that supports whatever viewpoint you might have. And if you cherry pick it out, it can make whatever you want to say look really good. It's important to make sure we're doing a wide range of work and that it's independent so that a full body of information is available. And that's where all of these studies, we talked a lot about the holding study I've been on, but there was also a lot of tagging studies where they were simply just getting transmitter tags or pit tags, a variety of different tags on fish quickly over the side of the boat and then tracking them through networks to see what happened.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of data that came from that. that also got folded together with our holding study work, and also got folded together with stream and estuary work, and it all kind of came together to get this more detailed picture of what we can do to improve survival. And so a lot of independent work that all gets kind of amalgamated, for
Yeah.
lack of a better word. And so again, I encourage people, if they're interested, go look at the summary. You can link it to it from that Release Them Right site, and you can fill your heart's content with an awful lot of data
Yeah,
and a lot of
absolutely.
interesting stuff in there. So
Yeah, it's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together slowly. And I'll put the links down in the description on this video for people as well.
yeah,
Um,
and you can also find my contact information at the Sport Fishing Institute of BC website. Happy to talk with anyone that's interested,
yeah.
that wants to know more, whether it's a study or one particular piece, or something that we've talked about today that maybe you don't understand. Encourage you to reach out, and happy to talk with anyone.
Where was it that you guys conducted this study?
Yeah, it was actually out in Bamfield, so out in Barkley Sound, on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and it was done at the Bamfield Marine Sciences Center,
Okay.
which is a huge research center that's already in place in Bamfield, supported by multiple universities. And so, one of the reasons we chose there, a great amount of infrastructure already there. They have salt water plumbed in from out in the inlet from deep water, so it's good, clear, cold salt water. So we have great saltwater flow, which you're going to need for a holding tank setup.
Mhm.
So we built a 4 tank holding facility there with the saltwater plumbed in. We have good moorage and access, plus Barkley Sound, a phenomenal Chinook and coho fishery right there. So we were able to access good fishing at multiple times during the year. So we could look at different size ranges of fish, different populations, different rivers, different stocks, all those things. So it was a great location to do all that work. And we do have another year of field work coming up. Right now, we're looking at coho. So we took
Okay.
all these things that we mentioned. The first few years of the study were on Chinook, and now we're doing them on coho. And one other piece of work that we're doing is something kind of unique, and I'll point that out quickly. It's called respirometry. And it's essentially like, think about if you, as a patient, go to your doctor, he sends you to a cardiac doctor, puts you on a treadmill, and hooks a whole bunch of wires up to see how you're doing,
Yeah.
see what your heart's doing, what your lungs are doing. It's kind of the same thing with the salmon. We're catching that fish and putting it right into a tube of controlled water with a whole bunch of oxygen meter sensors in there. And the computer is tracking how that fish recovers from that catch event and how long it takes it. And then we track it overnight, so we have some values to compare to. And anyway, really detailed work. And it was the first time it's ever been done in saltwater. It's been done a lot in freshwater on salmon in
Okay.
kind of a river environment, but we're able to do it in saltwater and do it out on the science boat right after we caught the fish.
Oh, wow.
So that gave us some real information about just how tired is the fish after
Hmm.
an event. And so one of the things we looked at in that study in particular was maybe the use of flashers, or not using a flasher, using what we call a dummy flasher on the cannonball, and just having the lure be straight to the
Yep.
fish. And it actually showed that fish got a lot more tired with that flasher in line as
Okay.
opposed to a dummy flasher.
Yep.
Now, I will say, during that part of the study in Barkley Sound, the fish are shallow in general. They're 50, 60 feet is probably a deep fish in that study that we brought up,
Right.
versus a lot of other areas of the coast. You may be fishing 200 feet or deeper in some cases. So
Hmm.
we still have to look at that. Something we're going to do this summer, have a look at deeper fish to see if anything looks different. But if you're on that website and you see a section about flashers and dummy flashers, that's what it refers to. And
Okay.
that particular study in general is going to be ongoing because, like we talked about, cherry picking data with only one sample size and one year's worth of data, not enough to really draw clear conclusions, but some early indications
Yeah.
show that. And then something else that we learned in that particular part of the study, we were testing a what we call a sling. And so if you've been online a lot, or maybe you're a freshwater angler, you've seen slings of various designs being used in muskie fisheries or some of those, and
Right.
maybe some other places. But what we did is we took and built a sling out of the canvas material that we use for our big science trough that's on the boats. So it's a black canvas right now because we needed a starting point. And then we were able to land that fish in the trough and then pull it right out into our sampling trough without a net, without having to tail grab it, without having to do any of those things.
Yeah.
And in most cases, we could get the hook out, we could get a measurement, and do all those things without really handling the fish. And in most cases, we could get the hook out, we could get a measurement, and do all those things without really handling the fish. And in most cases, we could get the hook out, we could get a measurement, and do all those things without really handling the fish. And
Okay.
and then right in a release bag and over the side for the science boat to pick up. So it was something we tested for. We were trying to get to this idea of what they call a control fish in science, which is a fish that has almost zero damage, represents what would happen if we simply just pulled the hook out and let it swim over the side of the boat.
Hmm.
But in order to hold the fish for 14 days, we do have to land it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of we're trying to get as close as we could. So anyway, in this first year of coho and looking at the respirometry study, we were testing the sling. And what we found is if we were able to land a coho with that sling and it didn't have a line wrap or some other kind of physical damage from the fight, which we've all caught coho, they spin around all over
Yeah.
the place and quite often line wrap, or they shake all over the place and bury the hook somewhere far deeper while you're trying to get it out, and all those things.
Yeah.
But if we got a fish that didn't have any of that, it had almost 100% survival. And
Wow.
so it was, again, we've got to test it more. It was only 1 year worth of data, but it was a pretty clear indication of what would be the positive impacts of not handling fish, removing hooks at boat side,
Yeah.
using smaller hooks, and doing all these things. And here's a really clear example of just how positive it could be. So it was a really encouraging thing that came out of that. So we're going to be doing further work there on those slings, maybe looking at some different materials, potentially, a really, really fine, tight mesh like what's used in some aquarium settings, where
Okay.
if we were in a troll fishery, you wouldn't be able to stick that net in the water. The drag would just about rip it out of your arms.
Yeah.
But if you took the boat out of gear, or maybe you were in the sling scenario type of thing, is there some other way so that if you had a fish that for whatever reason you needed to bring it on, or in the case of yourself and others that participate in DNA sampling in another study, we're trying to look at how can we still potentially get that fish where we can do the sampling, or be able to, if you're in really rough water, kind of capture that fish in some way and allow yourself to remove the hook safely and let the fish swim away without leaning way over the side of the boat in really rough water. So going to be doing some more testing on that. So stay tuned.
Okay.
We'll know more after this year, but
Well,
it
look
was
forward
really
to it.
encouraging to see those fish, such a dramatic uptick in survival when there
Yeah.
was it was close to no damage as we could get. So
Yeah.
positive sign.
What about when like with fish are they able to spit hooks themselves? Like how does like what are we
They
looking
sure
at to get a
are. So
leader?
yeah, it's something we didn't talk about. So in one of the other studies we're doing, something called a reference fishery. And it's meant to monitor what goes on at sea during, like, say, a mark selective fishery. Because if you're participating in that fishery, the only fish you're going to retain are marked. And so when you get to the dock and creel survey is there, the only fish they're getting DNA information about are fish you kept.
Yeah.
Well, those releases are important for a lot of things in the science world. So this reference fishery is out there monitoring that. So that's what I'm kind of referring to. But as part of that, we bring the fish on board and we're putting it right into a cooler because we want it to settle down for a minute and we need to be able to do DNA sampling and a couple other things. So there's a cooler full of water. And what we started seeing is oftentimes you bring that fish in, you put it in the cooler and close the lid, wait about 15, 20 seconds for it to settle down before we open it back up and do the sampling activity. A lot of times that hook is laying loose in the bottom of the cooler.
Hmm.
Now, granted, they bounce, they thrash
Yeah.
around a little bit when you first close the lid, but a lot of them are able to throw that hook pretty easily.
That's in,
So
that's
what
interesting.
that leads to is if you've got a fish that comes up both sides, and let's say the hook is a little deep and it looks like it's maybe in a problem zone, just cut the leader and let the fish swim away rather than lifting it and
Yeah.
trying to get your tool in there and it's a little deep and now you're putting extra stress on the fish. Cut the leader and let it swim away. And in a lot of cases, that fish is going to be able to throw that hook pretty easy once it swims away. Especially with the barbless hooks that are part of our recommendations, they're quite often able to get that thing to rock out. And that cooler kind of was a first indication. We started seeing it a lot.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads to the idea of if it's too deep, just cut the leader.
Yeah.
And it's going to give that fish the best chance to swim away
Yeah. Less handling.
and survive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really good information. Is there any way people can help support SFI?
There is, the Sport Fishing Institute is a not for profit organization that represents the saltwater fishery in a lot of ways. You can go to the website. There's some links to all the various projects and things. If you want to become a member, you can do that. But we also encourage people to just be involved in some way, whether it's the SFI or Pacific Salmon Foundation or whoever it may be. Um, Chances are there's something that speaks to an area close to home, whether it's one of the PSF projects, maybe a research project the SFI is doing, but reach out and get involved in some way, whether it's dollars, whether it's volunteering and helping out at maybe a local hatchery or one of those types of things. Anything we can do as anglers to be involved and continue to get more information about the fish in our fishery and how we can make things better, anything is good.
Yeah,
So I encourage anyone to reach out again if you're looking for avenues of how to be more involved. Happy to talk about that more.
awesome. Well, thank you very much, Lance. This has been some really great information for myself, and I know I'll be changing some of my fish handling and practices moving forward. So no, I appreciate you taking time out of your day for us for this.
Absolutely, and happy to do it. And just ask everyone to just kind of keep that ND in mind. It's not something that's going to happen overnight,
Yep,
but the more we're working towards it, to handling fish as little as possible, the more positive the impact will have, and the better the fish will be in the long run.
absolutely. And then the better our fisheries are.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jeff.